Thank you, everybody, for coming to the LGBTQ Caucus committee meeting. I have the agenda, which I will share to the screen. We have present at the beginning of the meeting myself, Councilmember Nancy Van Rees, the Vice Chair Brett Withers, Secretary Russ Bradford, and Emily Benedict. Our fifth compadre is on his way, Zach Young. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and read the motion pursuant to Governor Lee's Executive Order number 16, I think almost 17, I think is almost in effect, regarding electronic meetings as extended by Executive Orders 34, 51, and 60. I make a motion that this committee meeting agenda constitutes essential business of the Metropolitan Council, and the meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of COVID-19 outbreaks.
Second.
Great. And all those approved?
Aye.
Aye.
No one in opposition. We will move forward to the item on the agenda. The approval of the minutes. If everybody was able to take a look at the minutes, thank you again. Councilmember Bradford for being so diligent and making sure that we are clean and mean. Were there any corrections to the minutes that those present have to make? Seeing none, I move that we accept the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Fantastic. That takes care of the official business. In regard to that, we have a number of different things that we have on deck to discuss tonight. We have some special guests with us. I want to acknowledge Brandon Marshall from the mayor's office is once again here with us in observation and to answer any questions as we proceed with the agenda from the mayor's office. We also have later in our conversation, Maxine Spencer from the Oasis Center that is going to present to us what is happening there. And Maxine will be joining us shortly. And we're going to move some things around a little bit on our agenda and go ahead and let Joe Woolley from the LGBT Chamber of Commerce give an update on things that are happening with our businesses in the area and the activities that he's been working on, particularly this last week. Joe, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you so much. Council member, really appreciate being invited to touch base with you all and just update you on a few things from the Chamber's work. Advocacy is the name of the game right now. The state legislature is in session, and unfortunately, discrimination against LGBT people is high on their list of priorities this year. The anti-trans student athlete bill, which is what we have labeled it, because that's the intent of what this bill does, or is, has moved forward. We testified on Wednesday in front of the Senate Education Committee, which is the committee we thought we had the best chance to stop this bill from moving forward. We presented the business case against discriminatory bills and the economic impact that the state could face if they passed them. There was a lot of legal, the ACLU's head LGBT legal expert presented testimony that made it clear that the Idaho anti-trans athlete bill and the Idaho birth certificate bill that were passed in January of last year are both held up in federal court. Of course, you all know that the Bostock case ruling at the Supreme Court included gender identity and sexual orientation under Title VII. And the Biden administration on day one made it clear that they were going to expand that ruling into not just employment, which the Trump administration was enforcing, but education, healthcare, sports. And so that case is standing in the courts. It's been deemed unconstitutional already by one lower court judge. The bill itself looks to not be held up as constitutional. It's going to bring penalties against the state, or it looks to bring penalties against the state from the federal government. And then as well as the discriminatory image it gives the state and the boycotts and economic harm that those bring. It was moved forward. We made those cases. It was clear. The business voice was definitely the piece, or the business voices against it and the economic impact and harm to the economy were definitely what was picked up in media coverage after. And we will continue to make that message. It will be on the floor of the Senate on Monday. We expect it to unfortunately pass. We're going to do what we can there. It will then move to the House, and then it would move to the governor, but it could be signed into law by the end of next week, potentially, if not the week after. The bills that are following this, specifically the trans hormone bill and the trans healthcare bills, are detrimental to transgender youth's lives. It will affect many, many, many teens. And those are the ones that they're all discriminatory. They all shouldn't pass, but these healthcare bills specifically are very dangerous. And if one were to pass, Tennessee would become the first state to pass one of these, and I believe would bring down the economic boycott similar to the bathroom bill in North Carolina in 2016, which had an economic impact of $3.76 billion. And Charlotte, the city that is the powerhouse of North Carolina, similar to the way Nashville is in Tennessee, felt it the most. And I'm coming to you to just to update you on this where we are up there, because Nashville will feel these effects very as soon as they go into effect. We immediately felt it with the adoption bill last year when it was passed. I'm aware of 14 cancellations to meetings and conventions that were to be held here. I wrote 7 letters asking them not to leave and to stay here, because we push against these when they're there, and then we work to stop the fallout from them because it affects our businesses and our members or constituents in the city of Nashville. Wanted to update you on all of that and answer any questions that you might have, so you can educate council members and anybody else, constituents, that this is taking place. We're trying to get the word out as much as we can to have people act. It seems like a different year. We do have some good news on the national front, that the Equality Act was passed by the House. I am still hopeful that it can be passed by the Senate, although that has been brought into question recently, but I am still hopeful. I think with the Equality Act, something the council could be made aware of is that it did pass because it's a great way for us to educate on the protections that it's bringing, protections that people think we already have, the LGBT community already has, and it's a great way to say the Equality Act would do these things for and protect the LGBT community. And people scratch their head and say, wait, that's not already illegal? Wait, you're not already protected from that? And that might be an opportunity there for some education from the caucus to the larger council or to the city. That's all I have for now. Any questions that you might have? I will stay for the conversation around the boards and commissions. I had a good conversation with Councilmember Young about that, and we would love to be able to offer some of our information that we have and work with the city to perhaps broaden self-ID. We've been working on it for a while for Metro employees, and I think there are some simple changes that could be implemented with boards and commissions, and it could gather better information than it's currently doing in the form. It's great. It's the baby. It's the tiny step. It's the baby step. that you can take. There's some really simple other steps that will actually give us better information to use around LGBT diversity and inclusion.
Thank you for the Tennessee legislature update and for continuing to be at the forefront of understanding that it's diversity, inclusion, and equitable cities are productive cities that people like to live in and like to come to. So I appreciate you doing that. I did have a couple of questions as it relates to LGBT businesses and whether or not you've had any additional progress for the program in regard to certification. If we have any newly certified businesses that we should be looking for and assisting in regard to procurement opportunities, things of that nature. Also, with the budget coming up, not knowing what the mayor may or may not do that has been done in the past, to hear from you what your thoughts are in regard to that.
So the Metro appropriation the chamber receives for $25,000 is to certify, to help certify LGBT businesses and get them certified and registered with Metro in the database. And then we're able to track LGBT certified businesses in that database, the numbers that we have. And then of course, there's a mark when they apply for Metro contracting that they can check that box, because the important thing there is that we're counted and tracked and we can show disparity if there is any. We are still, very thankful that we became the first city in the South, the 13th in the country to do this. And we just had our seminar in January with the Business Administration Office, partnered with us and the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and we presented a program around certification. So we talked about how the NGLCC certifies. They're the national certifying body. They're members of ours. You join the chamber, then you go to national and you get certified with national standards similar to Black-owned business, women-owned business. Then you come back to your chamber, and we have really developed a great and unique relationship with Metro and then all of the other corporations and entities that recognize LGBT certified in their minority or diversity spend. So we take our members to Metro and say, this is where you start with this database. The BAO talked about how you do business with Metro, how you certify as a LGBT BE, business enterprise, but then you also can check all of the other boxes that you are. So if you're a women-owned business, a Black-owned business, Hispanic-owned business, and then Metro recognizes small business, which most of our members fall into if they are LGBT certified. And talked about that process and then doing contracting with the city. But then we were able to, with this program, also build it out to not just doing business with Metro, but you then can go over to Nissan that does diversity spend, or Alliance Bernstein or Bridgestone. And then you go down the list of corporate members that are looking for that. And Metro's database has become the go-to here in Middle Tennessee. And we've really pushed for that. That benefits the city as well, because it has more minority contractors in this database as the place to find minority contracting. We are now up to 28 LGBT certified businesses. That started at 12 when we signed the executive order 2 years ago. So it has significantly, it has affected our LGBT business enterprise growth significantly. It also helps us in a number of other ways to educate around small business support. We're very thankful for it. We were the only minority chamber of the 4 that took the funds this year, and we're very grateful for it. And we'd love to, continue to receive Metro support for this important work.
That's great. If you could follow up with a list of those 28 businesses, I know that everyone on this caucus, as well as others, would want to make sure that we draw attention to them get them as much support as we can, and then also make sure that our fellow council members are aware of that success story. So help us help you tell that story. I really appreciate it.
I would love to do that. And just to point out, the LGBT certified businesses are also Black-owned businesses, are also women-owned
That's right.
businesses, because
That's right.
the LGBT community is the most diverse community there is.
Well, and this might be a chance for us to demonstrate that. I mean, you know, to provide your own check boxes on those, so that we can just, you know, give a visualization of what that looks like.
Sure.
I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you were able to give us an update, and stick around if you'd like. Maxine, I appreciate you coming. Thanks so much. We got started without you, but we made him go first, and so don't get confused on the agenda. We are going back to the beginning of our supposed agenda was the now to get an update about Nashville Prep Clinic. Mr. Zach Young has not joined us yet, and so I did not hear from him in regard to his special report on that. So we may need to go ahead and just bump that to our next meeting, if that's okay with everybody. So that brings us to a conversation that that we've been all having, which is the diversity on boards and commissions, and what has happened so far, what needs to happen, and how we can involve ourselves in making sure that we're being progressive and making good things happen. At the request, at the request of Councilmember Benedict, Young, myself, I think that they probably got asked up and down. Brandon can attest to that. We did get a report. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen on this report on boards and commissions, just some aggregated demographic data that has been provided by the mayor's office. And the written PDF of this was distributed to this caucus, and I believe is going to all the minority caucuses as well as to the council as a whole. But I bring it here to our meeting for discussion. I want to remind ourselves to be extremely proud of what this caucus did by adding the self-ID box on the council information form to remind us whenever the mayor's office, the mayor decides that they're going to submit someone to a boards or commission for confirmation to the council. Of course, we get a letter from the mayor's office saying this person has been vetted by us and we are asking for you to approve them. Usually there's a bio attached, some information, sometimes not. After that, the Rules and Confirmations Committee created a form, I believe in 2015, 16, that asked for additional information that was to help us gather some demographic data, among other things. And so we sometimes then also get that form. They are not required to fill out the form. They are all asked to complete the form. On that form now, there is a self-ID box. And so since we started asking for that information in March of 2020, we've been able to start gathering a little bit of data. That would not have happened without this caucus's action. So we need to remind ourselves to be proud of that and to see how we can move forward on that. Council Member Benedict, you were able to secure this information for us in time for the meeting. Did you have comments about this matter?
You've covered it.
Did I really?
I mean, I don't, in the interest of time, and I always like to, respect everybody's time and go as fast as we can while being thorough. This is something I asked for. I think a bunch of people asked for it on the body, in the body prior to the last council meeting. There were a lot of concerns, particularly about the Fair Board diversity. And as the result of that, we had a 3-hour conversation at the last council meeting about, nominees that were there, and really that spurred this dialogue. But based on the Fair Board conversation, I reached out to the mayor's office, to Mike Jamison in the mayor's office, and said, I want to see demographic information. And so the only thing I would say that I asked him for yesterday is new. And so he has not had time. And Brandon, I know you guys have not had time to do this yet. Well, I would think that you maybe haven't. I'm very curious to know, first of all, to benchmark the diversity against the city, right? So Zach was talking about, I believe, 6% of the city. I forget the stats, Nancy. I don't want to say the wrong thing there. So
sure. Well, yeah, there was a national release of information. I believe it's 5.6% of the data that came in nationally were identifying as LGBT. The breakout of the acronym is still a big question mark for all of us. But that by having that national data, it's reasonable to have a benchmark to say, okay, based on that data, we should be striving for 6% of all members of all boards and commissions in the city of Nashville to be LGBTQ. So that was, I think, a reasonable kind of target date, target, if you will. And we know that there are others that that may not have checked a box or filled out a form, or no one asked them. That I think is our big next step. Brandon Marshall,
Can I jump in just with a couple other things? So the one thing is, I want to understand, does every board and commission represent the city demographically, right? So we might have 45% female and 54% male, but if all of the economic development committees or boards are all men, right? Then we want to look at that demographic as well, and see if we can't align every single board and commission, is what I would hope, to make sure, we don't want to have the LGBTQ community only on the Arts Commission, for instance. I think it's great that we're on the Arts Commission. That's something that's important to our community, but economic development is equally important. And so, I want to look and see what can we do to the board across the board, and make sure that the demographics meet the city's needs. I think the other piece is understanding, where are these volunteers coming from? What zip codes, what council districts? And again, are we filling these positions in an equitable manner? Are they all coming from the west side? Are they coming from the north side? Are we really getting volunteers from all over the city, so that everybody has equitable representation? So those are the goals that I have in mind as the result of this. I think it's, we're at the beginning of a good learning here. And as we gather more information, we'll be able to take some action. And I know as a caucus, we'll be able to come out and make sure that our folks are always at the table. Thank you.
Now, just this is Councilmember Brentwood, just to chime in, the council district and zip code is collected currently, so that should be something that could be compiled pretty quickly as well.
That's correct. I think that it would be extremely interesting to get as much micro data that is available made visible. And I want to request for Brandon Marshall from the mayor's office to just give a report on how this mayor's office is approaching this challenge. And I know that beginning with Mayor Barry and again with Mayor Briley, that we had a steady commitment that was out loud to make these things happen. And I know that this mayor's office has done a lot of hard work to make their Mayor Cooper's office look like the city, but now pivoting to do that same sort of effort on boards and commissions, and just hearing from you from the mayor's office kind of what's underway and what we can do to be helpful.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will take any questions that you all have tonight, and I'll bring it back to Mike and the mayor. What I do know from right now, like you mentioned earlier, that this was submitted to the clerk's office this afternoon. We're working on an overhaul that will probably expound on this a little bit more, I think, with all the boards and commissions, and that may be something that may not come out until the next few months from right now, but we are working on getting as much information and statistics as possible. I do know that I believe Council Member Tom Cash is working on a legislation that we are also fully supporting. And basically, I mean, you all probably know that every year it'll be asked that boards and commission, I think, demographics are released every year. So we're definitely supporting that and helping him with that bill. I don't have much else to add after what else was already said. But I will say that the boards and commissions that the mayor's office has worked on this year is, I think, the most diverse that we've had in quite some time. And we just really, the goal is to reflect Nashville and Davidson County as a whole. So I think that's the ultimate goal or that's the ultimate message that we want to put out there, that there's still work to do, but we're definitely committed to doing that.
Chair, Brandon mentioned the BL 2021-567 that's being brought by Councilmember Cash with regards to getting an annual report of board and commission demographics. As a caucus, would you entertain us signing on to that, co-sponsoring that? It's only up for first reading on Tuesday, but I know that, I just would like to see if we'd consider as a caucus supporting that. And that's just a last minute thing. The agenda came up. So
that's a reasonable question without Zach here. I think that we might need to kind of decide that all on our own because we would want to make sure we did that full-throated if that's the case. I haven't had the chance to read it, so I feel awkward giving my opinion one way or the other. I'm sure it's fine, but at the same time, what may be important for us on this first reading is to make sure that the language is inclusive in regard to the request for the what data. So you sound like you may have read it. Does it have is the LGBTQ anywhere in the legislation?
Councilmember Bradford also has already signed on to it, I believe, based on what I saw in Legistar today. But it is very basic and it doesn't call out any groups. It just says provide a report of the demographics. I believe that it is as presented to each board and commission. So it would be based on the self-identification criterias or check boxes that are on the applications today. So it doesn't call out anything.
I'm not quite sure of that because there is no checkbox on anything coming from the mayor's office. That's only on the council form. So even if if it could be clarified that the demographics coming from the form that is provided by because
I've got it. Sarah, I pulled it up.
What I'm saying?
I pulled it up and the language is in there. If you want, I can read the.
It is.
Yep.
Let me give you if you have it up, I'll give you screen share, officers, if you want to put it up on the screen.
You got it.
Un momento. Then those at home can see it as well. Okay, try that.
All right. There you go. Can you see that?
There you go.
Okay. See the, so 2.64.060, the Metropolitan Clerk shall submit a report to the council and the mayor's office on or before October 1 of each year, containing demographic information about every board and commission whose membership is elected or confirmed by the council. That report shall include the current demographic composition of the members and of each board as compared to the demographic composition from the previous year. For purposes of this report, quote, demographic composition, end quote, means the percentage of racial minorities, ethnic minorities, and self-identified LGBTQ status as disclosed on the questionnaire submitted to the Metropolitan Clerk at the time of confirmation. So again, it is just up for first reading. Of course, the agenda just came out this week, couple days, 48 hours ago. So.
No, that's thank you for that. Thank you for that, Grace. Yeah, I don't see women on here. So let's do this. Thank you. Let's see if we can have it discussed, and then see if the caucus can feel like they're at a point to where they can sign on to it. Then that'd be fantastic. I just have, how I'm just noticing.
Right. No, you make a good call. As a woman, how did I miss
yeah,
that?
it's like, wait a minute, and women. So but that's something that we can. I know that we have another guest. I want to go quickly to the next agenda item.
Councilmember, can I bring up a really important topic I think that should be included in this conversation?
Yeah, Joe, a couple minutes. Go ahead.
What we're doing is it's great. Thank you all for pushing it and doing it, because a year ago it was talked about and now we're doing it. We have pushed for Metro to do self-ID for 4 years now, through 4 administrations now, and it has not come to fruition. There are certain steps with any self-ID that should be pointed out, is that you point to your non-discrimination ordinance, and so people feel safe to then self-ID. But with LGBT self-ID, you can ask the question as you do now, are you LGBT? But you're not really tracking much data other than they're LGBT. We need to track gender identity and sexual orientation. Gender identity hits at exactly what Councilmember Van Rees and Benedict saw with gender is not pulled out specifically in this. And if it is very easy to change the gender ID category to be male, female, trans female, non-binary. There's a whole spectrum that can be added to that, depending on how comfortable and how open and inclusive the asker wants to be. But then you need to have the sexual orientation question to identify straight, lesbian, gay, and bisexual. Those are 3 points that should be made to be asked. And then again, there's a whole spectrum that can be asked. But I'm highly, like, if you're having this conversation now and the education's happening, I would really push to have gender identity considered in gender and sexual orientation to be added. Both of them are self-ID'd in this discussion, because then we can really start to track and see. Right now, if you looked at those numbers, the one non-binary person was because they said, I'm non-binary, and identified and made the change. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to do that, other than they would have had to select a gender and then click LGBT to fall into that category there.
That's fantastic feedback. We will carry that forward to any amendments and opportunities that we have to continue, because I think everybody wants it to be clear. And I know that we would have the support of the mayor's office to make anything clearer, the better, in regard to this. So
racial representation in that is very important too. This affects
sure,
all
Joe. Yeah.
So
great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We have another guest to get to. I want to quickly remind everybody that the Bianca Page Way is on second reading. Tuesday. All green lights on that one, which is fantastic. The Equality Act we touched on a little bit earlier. We talked about having a thank you letter to Representative Cooper for continuing to champion this legislation. And I wanted to see if this caucus had any objection to drafting that letter, and to see if perhaps we might get a volunteer to draft that letter. Any comments or questions about that?
I'm okay drafting the letter. What I would really
man.
like to do is to write, what I would also like to do is to send a letter to our senators. Because I think we need to do that as well.
Yeah. Well,
Nicely,
if you,
politely.
I'm in for that. We lost Russ because of a hard stop, and he's also our secretary. So from this moment on, if someone could just make some basic notes, then that would be fantastic. We still have a quorum, so we're going to keep going. Brett, I welcome you to draft these letters and distribute to us so that we can get it on the letterhead and get it out to all three
Our federal representatives,
federal representatives. Yeah, there you go. That's fantastic. Emily, do you have any objection to that at all?
No, I was going to offer to write it. So Brett spoke, he unmuted more quickly. Brett, if
cool.
you'd like me to,
well, you guys
if you'd like
can
to collaborate on that at all,
work
just
on that together.
through the council office, of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not legislative, so I think that we'll be okay. Good. The other thing on the agenda was a reminder about my connection is unstable. Can you hear me okay? I'm on the Metro Wi-Fi. Okay, good. National Out to Win Day is April 2nd. If we could, during the month of March, prior to our next meeting, have a concerted effort to make sure that anything coming from the Victory Fund Institute that describes why it's important to run for office if you're LGBTQ, then that would be great. I just wanted to put that on the agenda so that we reminded each other, because it's going to come up really fast on April 2nd. A challenge to make sure that we do that. National Youth HIV/AIDS Awareness Day is April the 10th. Maxine has actually offered us some language to prepare a resolution in regard to that. So I will ask the council office after this coming meeting to prepare something for the first meeting in April regarding the recognition of April 10th, since we've had a request to make that happen. Is there any objection or concern or? Okay.
Chair Sanders. So Maxine, I think is going to speak. I've got I think there's a question about whether that should be a resolution or a proclamation.
Okay.
In my speaking with Maxine, we were able to have a brief conversation, and I welcome her thoughts upcoming. One of my, I guess, thoughts about that initially is that there isn't at this moment, I think it's sort of in an awareness building phase, and that probably if we're going to bring this to the council floor as a body, we are going to have more questions than answers. And so I think there's probably some background research and stuff that would need to be done. So there, I look forward to the discussion, but my thought is that a proclamation from us as a caucus is probably a good start for right now. And then we can also work social media stuff. But I think this is a real opportunity to begin a little bit deeper collaboration with some of our other partners and other organizations in the state and whatnot, to really have a bigger impact maybe a little bit later on. But that's a little bit my initial thought. But I do definitely want to, we can do a resolution if y'all want to do that as well. But my initial thought is that a proclamation might be a good start, and then to build from there. But I look forward to the discussion from Maxine and the rest of the caucus.
That's really wise feedback, and so let's pivot that discussion until we hear from Maxine. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce Maxine Spencer from OASIS, and welcome to the caucus, and we look forward to hearing what you have for us today. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to go ahead and ask, do I have share screen capability? Because after I talk about NIAID, I want to go ahead and do the full presentation.
You should have it.
Okay. All right. I see it. But I guess to kind of talk to what Councilman Withers and I discussed, I think at the very least, what 3 things that I kind of want or I'm hoping to see, kind of obviously recognition of NIAID, just kind of official recognition of NIAID, and saying that young people living with HIV and AIDS are important and we need to focus on their care and their access to information. And kind of going in with that, kind of reaffirming like these young people's rights to accurate knowledge and information about HIV and AIDS. And that kind of consists with everybody. Like we all need to know, we all need to have this kind of access. And what Councilman Withers and I discussed was particularly around funding. I think going into more of that discussion, we can continue working with like the Ending the Epidemic Council committee, and really going back into data that's already been done around the Nashville region, and we can kind of further do a lot more digging in on that, and seeing how else can we support young people living with HIV in the city. But I ultimately, I think like those are some of the things that I really just hoping to see out of this. So I don't know if there's any more questions that I can directly kind of answer, if the caucus has felt like I've kind of spoken to what has already been brought up, but I would like to continue this kind of conversation.
Anybody have any questions regarding this?
I think what Maxine, one of the things that Maxine and I talked about is that, every year with the LGBTQ Caucus works with the Minority Caucus on a World AIDS Day resolution. And I thought that this information that Maxine has shared with us was really helpful to me, because like I went back and read last year's resolution, which was very researched, but didn't mention youth at all, for instance. And so, or at least not specifically. And so, again, I mean, I think that with the, we have a really good partnership with the Minority Caucus on this particular topic. And it'd be good to maybe work with them a little bit more on this ongoing. But certainly it put something in my mind that I want to think about when we come up to World AIDS Day in December, that we do talk about that a little bit more. So that's number one. Number two, for the kind of the funding piece and some of the healthcare access stuff, we do have at least some relationships with nonprofit organizations here in town, and also our health department and things like that. And Maxine and I are kind of on the same page there, that we need to keep looking at that in more depth and have more discussions with our health department, the mayor's office, and any just kind of brainstorm, I think, about what are all the different ways that we can support that overall effort. My concern about the one of the elements in the stuff that we have is like a commitment to funding. And I just don't know that we can make a commitment to funding, at least at this time. And I don't want to overpromise, right? We can say that it's important to fund it for sure. But I think that I'm kind of looking at this as a really good start of a conversation that'll be much deeper as we go on. I think that finding a way to recognize the day probably itself is a really good first start probably for this year. And then expounding upon that more and more over time will be helpful, and probably more helpful to just bringing awareness a little bit beyond Nashville itself within the state of Tennessee, since a lot of the state looks to us on some of those things.
Yeah, I think that after this discussion, it seems like taking very similar language that was provided to us for the resolution and making a proclamation, and accompanying that proclamation with a press release, just to let folks know that this is something that you need to draw your attention to, and that we take it seriously. I think that would be extremely helpful. And if you want to, Maxine, continue to work with Councilmember Withers on that, so that a quote from you and the work of Oasis is included in that press release, then I think that would be extremely productive. Councilmember Benedict, do you have any comments, or do you agree with that?
I agree. I think great conversation, great topics,
Very cool.
and on target with my thoughts.
Fantastic. Maxine, you may now pivot to your other presentation for us, and you can share the screen and let us know what you have.
Okay. Bear with me here. I had a training earlier today, so I believe I've got all my ducks in a row. Oh, excuse me. So we can see just the first screen, first slide, correct? Great, thank you. When I had my training earlier today, it was a little bit messy. We didn't have that at the first time. So what I wanted to kind of propose to the LGBT caucus is basically a workforce development program for trans and gender nonconforming people. And really, I want to kind of go into a little bit of the economic state of trans people in Tennessee specifically. So trans people in Tennessee have some very high economic barriers. This information was taken from the National Center for Transgender Equality study that was done back in 2016. So looking at the state analysis, 20% of respondents in Tennessee were unemployed and 34% were living in poverty. So again, I kind of want to really focus on that as well. Thinking about trans people and how many of us just in the state total, and thinking about us as major population centers, that we are places where trans people might really be kind of centered and living in this form of poverty. And I most want to go into the employment in the workplace. And so 21% of trans Tennessee respondents that have ever been employed reported losing a job in their lifetime because of identity and expression. And then overall, 43% of respondents who had a job in the past year reported being fired, denied a promotion, or experiencing some other form of mistreatment related to their gender identity or expression during that year. And so I kind of bring all of that up to kind of really try to paint a little bit more of a picture that when it comes to trans people and having economic stability, there are a couple different barriers that you might have to go through. As we all are very, very happy to have seen a Supreme Court case with Bostick v. Philadelphia, if I have that case name correct, seeing them rule in the side of the community. There are more non-discrimination protections in place when it comes to the workplace, but still, as it pertains to the local community, I think that we need to have a stronger understanding and a stronger display of those protections. And I do kind of want to really get into this, that there is a gap in what folks are experiencing in the city. Like, I do understand, like, what I have here and the information that I have is state-based, not necessarily Nashville-based, but I think that highlights even more of a need, because we have not talked about trans people in this way before as a community. We have not talked about trans people in this way, that we need to figure out and really understand what are the economic conditions of trans people in the city. How are trans people faring? There's so many barriers, just thinking about school, thinking about housing, thinking about just even getting healthcare and identity documents. I don't know. I don't think we have enough of that conversation here in Nashville to do that. And so I do kind of like want to reaffirm any concerns, affirm any concern about this being such state specific data, but really also press that that is kind of more of a demonstrated need, rather, that we need more directly focused attention on trans communities and on the trans community in our neighborhood. And so really the proposal is a workforce development program for trans and gender nonconforming people that are 18 to 30 at risk of experiencing or are currently experiencing homelessness. And now getting a little bit more into the details of this program. So what this is asking for is the creation of a $500,000 grant to support the development of the program, to fund work with service providers to help identify folks to be part of the program, as well as establishing funds to support training for individuals that go through the program, and establishes a list of trans inclusive employer partners that are willing to be a part of the program. And so also what this is asking for is to kind of have a wraparound service for these people, for folks that are going through the program, getting them a job, and helping them make sure that they have housing, helping them make sure that they have other employment opportunities or skills or just refining their skills when it comes to different job skills, whatever those may be in that particular context, but really providing a support structure for trans people in the city. And really where this is basically coming off from is modeling a program that was recently passed last year in DC. So the District of Columbia focuses on, in their model of the program, focuses on 18 to 24-year-olds experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness in the district. But I think as it pertains to Nashville, excuse me, and the growth that Nashville is going through, I think that there's still significant need to have that kind of youth focus, but also kind of expand that range and to also kind of give a little bit more breadth and depth to providing that support network for trans people in the city. And really, I kind of want to reaffirm again, trans and gender nonconforming young people and just trans and gender nonconforming folks really face some very serious barriers to employment, and that can lead to chronic homelessness as an adult. And even if you are, for example, a 25-year-old, you might have had some sort of a job, but then if you can't get in the door again, then you're just gonna, what you've built up, you're gonna lose almost immediately. And so really the goal of the DC Workforce Development Program is providing these folks with the tools and experience necessary to obtain employment and helping them really sustainably have employment. And again, like I referred to a little bit earlier, having these workaround services. So really delivering like quality work readiness training services, providing short-term subsidized work experience, facilitating education trainings for participating employers, and collaborating with other youth service providers and just other providers that demonstrate a history of working with transgender nonconforming people, and also providing trauma-informed and wraparound services to make sure that program participants are really fully supported and are able to really have the stability that we want them to have. And really, ultimately, I see this as addressing a vital need for the city. Again, this program would provide direct economic stability to trans and gender nonconforming people in Nashville in the form of a job and in job training. As a trans person, like living in the city, to me, there's always that fear for folks that even if you do get a job, it's not enough. Even if you can find something, it's not enough. And even if you can find housing, will they take you? That's the thing. Will they support you? Can you get through? I think that this program can really help address those concerns for trans people that we haven't really talked about in a very, and I would say kind of like a more substantial way in the city. So I think that addresses the need to really show that we care about the economic stability of trans and gender nonconforming folks in Nashville. And it also shows that Nashville is one of the most innovative and thoughtful cities in the South. So Atlanta doesn't have a program like this. And DC passed this in June 2020. And so thinking about, other major areas in the South, technically we can call DC a little bit of the South. You can call that a little bit. I mean, for me, just personally, there's a little bit of a difference. There's a bit of a difference there. But you can call it. But if you don't, then if we were to implement this, we would be one of the only major cities in the South to have a program like this, and to really demonstrate that we are thinking critically about some of the most marginalized amongst our community. Really, it really demonstrates that, we don't just talk the talk, that we walk the walk as well. And also, this is really a mostly preventionary action towards preventing these folks from experiencing homelessness. So even if you are focusing again, like at the at-risk portion, even for folks that are experiencing homelessness, this is helpful for them, but then we are also trying to prevent it. And so we're really trying to address another issue that the community is already really tuned into. And then also, I think that this provides a local way of really strengthening the local acceptance of the new employment non-discrimination law that's been kind of affirmed by the Supreme Court, and really furthering an inclusive culture in our community. I will go ahead and stop sharing. That's all I have on the slideshow. But really, I truly believe that this program, even if the total cost was, I know $500,000 is a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Even if that total cost was adjusted, I do believe wholeheartedly that the establishment of this program would really, truly bring about some beneficial change for trans people in the city, and really help us address in a very innovative and creative way folks experiencing homelessness, connecting people to housing, and providing that sort of foundation for trans people in Nashville that you just wouldn't see anywhere else in the South. And so I'm more than happy to have any questions. I know I've kind of thrown a lot of information at you. I apologize if I've been monologuing a little bit too much. The training, I kind of got into the spin of things, but please feel free to ask any questions.
No, thank you very much for taking the time. We are right at the top of the hour, but I do want to give us a little bit of time to ask any questions that we might have on this program. Of course, Maxine works at the Oasis, so the Oasis Center, Launchpad, things that come out of that, the Just Us program, they're very well aware of the need. One question that I have for you is just where this number came from, this $500,000, where did that come from? If you are specifically asking this caucus to somehow find in the government's budget some money to be used in this way, we're going to need a breakdown as to how that would happen. Of course, it would have to go through procurement. So if you could help us kind of understand that, even if we started with baby steps on the study to find out the depth of the need, so that the answer to that need is appropriately addressed, then I'd love to just kind of know where that number came from.
So that number came from basically what the DC program initially asked for. And with DC, they also put in, so that workforce development program is a part of a whole slate of initiatives, about $2.7 million worth. Another additional $130,000 is solely devoted to workforce study for trans and gender nonconforming folks. But I also did kind of want to focus a little bit on the workforce development program itself. And so if it's possible to amend that, and I can also send a little bit more of the RFP and a little bit more of the other documentation that goes along with the DC program. I can send that to y'all as well. But that's kind of where that.
Yeah, I think you send it to Brandon. see if you can get the attention of the mayor, and kind of find out what they might need to be able to break that down. Because as Mr. Woolley had indicated, there are nonprofit grant opportunities, and there's a process and a procedure to do that. So if this is a project of Oasis that's wanting to ask for that, then you know, I want to make sure that we're leading you in the right direction as we enter into budget cycle. Councilmember Benedict or Weathers, did you have any questions for Maxine?
So I have similar questions. Zach and I both sit on the Budget and Finance Committee, so I think, you know, we'd be working very closely on that. Not like everybody else would as well, but certainly as we get into the weeds and in that committee, the things that Councilwoman Van Rees just mentioned absolutely are important for us to understand. So I think, but I love the idea of us leading on this. I think there's definitely a need. I would love to see us be able to do something, and for it to be more than just a, you know, small amount. I'd love, this is, you've got me very intrigued about this now. So I will be having a follow-up conversation with you, but I absolutely, on the numbers side, we'll have to get a little more info on that, or a lot more. And thank you for being here.
And what I would say is that direct appropriations have always been hard, even when we had a good budget in the council. And so the point about trying to work with the mayor's office early is important, but also to work with kind of the way that nonprofits get funded by Metro these days is to sort of work with an existing Metro department or Metro initiative and sort of find a way to plug into that. So you're helping a department to provide a service that they're already charged with providing, or something like that. So trying to identify those service delivery paths is a really effective way of getting that kind of Metro funding, number one. But number two, the thing that comes to mind for me is that, again, this might be a good opportunity to collaborate with the LGBTQ chamber itself. And also maybe, and welcome Joe Woolley's thoughts, but also the Entrepreneur Center. Right now, the Entrepreneur Center is working with a nonprofit, and I think they're called Parachute Bridge. But one of the things that they are doing is that they are offering like a resume writing service and teaching people how to work on, you know, job applications and LinkedIn and some of those things. But it's a free service that they're providing right now for young people who are under 32. And so that, again, might be another avenue to explore, working with the Entrepreneur Center and some other nonprofits to help make this really, really successful. Because Metro government itself, we do have job fairs through things like the Metro Action Commission and some things like that. But I think plugging into the corporate partners and the Entrepreneur Center and some of those things would really be help to achieve those goals really well, I think, of not only getting job applicants well trained and ready to go to market, but also to help to train and educate employers as well. So.
Yeah, great advice all around the table. If you haven't yet, excuse me, if Oasis has not yet reached out to Amazon, they of course are well known for being a trans-friendly place to work, and I know that they're wanting to be inclusive and diverse in their philanthropic work. And so even speaking with them, Alliance Bernstein is also extremely proactive, but Amazon will have jobs, you know, I mean, so that job training and healthcare benefits. I mean, they do, it's one of the what I understand, one of the best places to work if you're trans in America is at Amazon. So if you if you need any contacts or connections in regard to that, we're happy to help you with that. But as many wraparound ideas as we can get, the better, for sure.
And I want to kind of clarify.
Are there any other?
Even,
oh yeah, go ahead.
Even with my asks, my asks haven't necessarily been OASIS directive asks. These have been more asks that I bring in my own like personal capacity. So not necessarily committing the agency into everything. Just want to go ahead and make that clear. I don't want to come back, go to work and have everybody be like, "What did you say?" but these are just kind of personal and also kind of really from the heart, and really kind of just even from conversations that I've had and from what I've seen, just trying to really ask the council and ask our city to just be really more proactive in taking steps to really provide that kind of stability for my community.
Fantastic. You will need a nonprofit partner, so clue them in. let them know. If there are no other questions, the only thing remaining on our agenda is to set the date for our next meeting, which if we stay on this pattern would be March the 26th, the last Friday of the month at 6 p.m. We have already heard from Metro Nashville Police Department. Their recruitment officer would like to present at that meeting, and we have another opportunity to let Councilmember Young bring Nashville Prep Clinic back in. Yeah, it's just always going to be something to talk about. But does March the 26th still work for you guys?
Looks good.
Okay, cool. We'll do that. Mr. Marshall, do you have any messages from the mayor? Any final words that you might have as you've heard this very interesting? And I think either I froze.
Brandon, I don't know if you caught the chair's, I think she's freezing up a little bit, but did you have any, she was asking, do you have any messages from the mayor or any thoughts that you wanted to share with us?
Oh, not at this time. Yeah, no, I wasn't sure what she did say. Thank you for clarifying. I'm good.
Okay, cool. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All right.
Did I sound like Jeff Syracuse there? So move.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Colby, is it?
It's like who can say it first, right? Thank you so much for spending this time with us. We'll get this video back up. Mr. Bradford said he would complete the minutes based on reviewing the video. So we'll get that done. Brandon, I encourage you to share this video with the mayor's office as well, particularly as it relates to the comments from Maxine and the boards and commissions discussion. Thank you so much, everybody. Have an incredible weekend, and God bless you all. Take it easy. Ciao.